Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. CBS News has learned that Mexico has offered concessions to try and avoid President Trump's planned tariffs. They include putting 6,000 troops on its border with Guatemala and changing its asylum rules. The 5% tariffs on all goods coming in from Mexico would begin Monday unless a deal is reached that would satisfy President Trump's desire for Mexico to do more to stop illegal border crossings. A spokesperson for Mexico's foreign minister told Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan, quote, "The conversations continue advancing. We are exploring options to meet the growing number of undocumented migrants that cross Mexico. No agreement has yet been reached, but we continue negotiating." Earlier today, President Trump said Mexico needed to step up and blame Democrats for the current situation at the southern border.
Mexico's been making for many, many years hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, they've been making an absolute fortune on the United States. They have to step up, and they have to step up to the plate. And perhaps they will. We're going to see. They can solve the problem. The Democrats, Congress has been a disaster. They won't change. They won't do anything. They want free immigration to pour into our country. They don't care who it is. They don't care what kind of a record they have. It doesn't make any difference. They're not going to be changing anything. But we're having a great talk with Mexico. We'll see what happens. But something pretty dramatic could happen. We've told Mexico the tariffs go on, and I mean it, too. And I'm very happy with it. And a lot of people, senators included, they have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to tariffs. They have absolutely no idea.
Let's bring in CBS News' Nikole Killion. She's at the White House, and CBS News Capitol Hill producer Rebecca Kaplan. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Nikole, I'd like to start with you. What is the latest that you're hearing from the White House about these offers from Mexico?
Well, again, I think the White House continues to feel that progress is being made, but whether or not it's enough remains to be seen. We know in terms of this proposal that Mexico is offering to put some 6,000 troops along the Mexico-Guatemala border, again, is considered progress by the administration, but perhaps not enough. Now, in addition to that, we know that Mexico is also offering to perhaps overhaul some asylum rules, which would essentially allow many of these migrants who are coming from Central American countries to essentially seek refuge or get asylum in the countries that they step foot in first, rather than getting it from the United States. So that is something that the administration sees perhaps as additional progress, something a little more substantive and substantial, and as one administration source puts it, encouraging.
So, Nikole, is it clear what the White House would consider a win here?
Well, they've laid out several proposals that they would like to see, or several conditions, I should say, that they would like to see happen. And that has been a part of some of these discussions. For instance, we know that the administration would like to see Mexico shore up the Mexico-Guatemalan border. We also know that they want to see Mexico do more in terms of taking in some of these asylum seekers, also repatriating some of these migrants, and also, targeting and dealing with this issue of smugglers. The bottom line here, and an administration official emphasized this earlier today, is that they really want to see the number of illegal crossings into the U.S. go down. We know the numbers right now are at record levels, and they also want to see more cooperation from Mexico in addition to just seeing a more secure border.
So, Rebecca, over where you are, I'm wondering what you're hearing from lawmakers about how it is that the White House has been framing the need to impose tariffs on Mexico.
Well, Elaine, the pitch from the White House is obviously that this is all about border security and the need to get Mexico to step up and be more of a partner to the United States in stemming the flow of migrants coming from Central America. And that's broadly an idea that Republicans can get behind. They agree with the president that there needs to be more security at the southern border. There need to be additional measures. And they can certainly get behind the president's message that Democrats are stonewalling him from doing more on this issue through Congress. The issue is that the use of tariffs to actually bring about these changes in Mexican American policy. And for a lot of Republicans, tariffs really go against the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. These are costs that often get passed on to the American consumer, and they can really be seen almost as a tax on the American people. And so for Republicans, this is an area where they're really not completely comfortable. So what they seem to be hoping is that these tariffs will not actually take effect, but will really get Mexico to take additional steps, give more concessions in these negotiations with the U.S. to do more at the border so they ultimately don't even become necessary.
Well, we heard the president say that a lot of people, including senators, have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to tariffs. How is that being received, Rebecca? And what more can you tell us about the actual discussions in Congress to try to block his planned tariffs?
Well, Republicans certainly do think that they know a little bit about tariffs and about making U.S. policy. But again, this goes back to whether they are actually willing to go so far as to cross the president to stop this from happening. And that's why we've been hearing Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell say that he doesn't actually think these tariffs are going to go into effect. He thinks they're a bargaining tool to get Mexico to do more. So he's not even really willing to engage in what he sees as a hypothetical question of whether he might have to block the tariffs. Now, as we heard the president say in that clip you played, he's obviously very serious about doing this early next week. And so House Democrats, I think, are definitely going to go forward with some action. We saw earlier today, Richie Neal, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, said that he planned to introduce a resolution of disapproval next week if the president does go ahead with these tariffs, because in his view, it's not appropriate to use tariffs as a tool to influence U.S. trade policy. Well, to influence U.S. border policy.
So, Nikole, if the Senate were to block the tariffs, it could also overturn the president's previous national emergency declaration, which he used to fund construction of a border wall. How concerned is the White House about a potential undoing of one of the president's signature promises?
Well, I think at this point, the White House really feels that it will do, and the president himself will do all that it can to essentially defend this wall and also defend these tariffs. You know, the White House was asked specifically about whether or not it was worried about possible defections, especially among members of its own party, as it relates to this tariffs. If, you know, Republican senators in particular move forward and try to block them. And really, this White House official didn't even respond to that, and instead said that essentially the president has provided a number of proposals to Congress to deal with immigration and the border crisis. So essentially, they deflected that response.
Well, switching topics, the House on Thursday introduced a resolution to hold Attorney General William Barr and former White House counsel Don McGahn in contempt of Congress. Rebecca, what more can you tell us about that?
Well, this is a resolution, as you said, that they're going to use to really kind of put increased pressure on the White House, specifically on their trying to block Barr, the Attorney General, and Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, from handing over any documents, or in the case of Barr, the full Mueller report and all of the underlying documents that were used to prepare that. Now, this is really a chance for all of the members of the House to weigh in on what they view as really unprecedented obstruction by the White House. There's not actually any new legal authority that's going to be given to the House, but it will give all of these members, many of whom do not sit on the Judiciary Committee, which held Barr in contempt last month, a chance to put their stamp on this issue and say, we are not okay with what the White House is doing. And one actually practical effect it will have is reinforcing the fact that committee chairmen don't have to necessarily get a vote on the full floor of the House if they want to go to court to enforce these subpoenas they've been sending out. They're going to be able to just go directly to the White House, the House Counsel, which is controlled effectively by the majority party in the House, so by the Democrats, and say, we want to intervene, we want to go to court and seek civil enforcement of these subpoenas. So try to get the courts to rule that anyone in the administration who is refusing to hand over documents to the Congress has to do so.
Interesting. Well, also, Rebecca, what is the latest that you're hearing about negotiations for special counsel or former special counsel Robert Mueller to appear before Congress?
Obviously, we heard Mueller say last week that he really does not want to make any further statements about the report, and he wants it to stand for himself. But that's really not going to be enough to satisfy a lot of members of Congress up here. In particular, one concern that was discussed before the House was back this week was the fact that Mueller wanted to come testify perhaps in private behind closed doors, and that's not a concession that House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler was willing to make. He has said repeatedly that Mueller has to come testify in public, and those are negotiations that are actually still underway. I learned from a source today that DOJ is actually still handling negotiations for a potential Mueller appearance before the committee, even though Mueller is now effectively a private citizen and is done with the full Mueller report.
Yeah, which he, made very clear there.
Yes.
So, Nikole, Politico is reporting that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told senior Democrats, quote, of the president, quote, "I don't want to see him impeached. I want to see him in prison." What is the White House saying about those comments?
Well, dismissing them, as you would imagine. White House officials said earlier today that this is just another example of Democrats being out of touch. Also, they characterized these remarks as being radical and really just, again, said that this is just another example of Democrats aiming pointless attacks at this president. They emphasize that the president instead is focused and that he's overseas right now, of course, a meeting with world leaders, while Democrats continue to be obsessed over their investigations. Elaine?
Well, I want to play some of what Speaker Pelosi said Wednesday about impeachment. Let's listen to that.
Do you know most people think that impeachment means you're out of office? Did you ever get that feeling, or are you just in the bubble here? They think that you get impeached, you're gone. And that is completely not true. And I may have thought that myself 50 years ago. But you get impeached, and it's an indictment. It's an indictment. So when you're impeaching somebody, you want to make sure you have the strongest possible indictment.
So, Rebecca, this was really interesting to hear her talk about this, the way in which she understands the public perception on this issue of impeachment, and then to hear her say, according to Politico, this reporting that she wants to see the president, in prison. What are we to understand, Rebecca, from those public comments at the podium and then these private comments that are being reported by Politico?
Well, Speaker Pelosi is kind of acutely aware of what happens politically if Democrats move to impeach the president when the rest of the country still sees it as premature. They could be looking at a situation like the late 1990s where Republicans moved to impeach Bill Clinton, and they paid a price for it in the midterm elections and lost seats in the House. And she is certainly concerned about making sure that she maintains her majority after the 2020 election. But I think she's also acutely aware of perhaps the futility of an impeachment proceeding. Sure, it would likely pass the Democratic House, but then it would die in the Senate, where Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell controls things. And she wanted to remind Americans, you think that if we go out and impeach the president, that means he's out of office. And that's certainly not the case. All it means is that we've spent a lot of time and energy and political capital on this issue that's not going to result in the president being removed from office. So that's not the best way to do it. And some more really interesting remarks from Speaker Pelosi in that press conference yesterday. She really swung back at her critics who said, you guys are just all over the place with impeachment and Democrats are really divided. She said, we have a plan. We know what we are doing. And that plan that she has been trying to telegraph both publicly and privately to her members is that the House is having a lot of success in court getting access to these documents they're seeking to investigate the president. They don't need impeachment proceedings to do that. They can keep going ahead with this investigation in a very measured, focused way and let the courts hand them the victories that they want. So she's certainly trying to keep the lid on. And so far she is. The CBS News count has upwards of 50 Democrats supportive of opening an impeachment inquiry. That doesn't mean an impeachment vote, but an inquiry. But we also have to bear in mind that's just a quarter of the entire Democratic caucus in the House here. So she still has a lot of leeway and a lot of support from her members to run this the way she's been running it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that's an important point to underscore here when you look at those numbers and why it is that she is so focused on sticking with her strategy. All right, Nikole, Killion and Rebecca Kaplan, thanks to you both.
Thank you, Elaine.